Zia-ul-Haq explained The Man, the Machine, the Poisoned Architecture of Power from 1977 to 1988. Muhammad Zia-ul-Haq is not a chapter in Pakistan's history. He is a system rewrite. Most leaders come and go. Some even rule for a decade and still leave only rubble. Zia did something far more durable and far more dangerous. He re engineered the state operating system, its legitimacy, its laws, its institution, its alliances, and its political incentives. Then died before accountability could touch him. This is why his shadow is still alive. To understand Zia properly, we must understand dictator versus democrat, religious versus secular, patriot versus traitor. Zia is best understood as a power consolidator who replaced fragile civilian legitimacy with three harder materials: military dominance, religious justification, and geopolitical rent. Every major tension Pakistan struggles with today, civil military imbalance, weaponized religion, institutional fragility, sectarian violence, militant pipelines, was not simply born under him, it was standardized, legalized, staffed, and normalized. Zia was not a mythic strongman like Hitler or Stalin, not a theatrical populist like Bhutto, not even a modern CEO general with polished global optics. Zia's power was built on something uglier and more effective: the ability to appear harmless while preparing domination. That detail matters. The most dangerous consolidators often do not look dangerous at all. They look obedient, they look disciplined, they look ideologically clean. They look like the kind of man who can control. Bhutto promoted Zia past more senior officers. Whether Bhutto did it for personal calculation, misjudgment, or political convenience doesn't change the result. Zia was selected because he was not expected to bite, and then he bit harder than anyone else would have. The first lesson of Zia: never select leaders based on how non threatening they feel, select them based on how controllable their incentives are. Zia's incentives were simple. He couldn't survive in civilian politics. He lacked charisma, the party machinery, and the narrative legitimacy that Bhutto had. So, he did what consolidators do when they lack legitimacy. He manufactured legitimacy, first through force, then through courts, then through religion, then through geopolitics. The coup, Operation Fair Play, and the beginning of permanent civilian weakness. On 5th of July 1977, Zia overthrew Bhutto's government and imposed martial law. On the surface, this is another South Asian coup story, like many others, but Zia's coup was uniquely consequential because he didn't treat it as temporary takeover. He treated it as a constitutional reset. He promised elections, he delayed them. He promised neutrality, he built mechanisms to ensure civilians would never again be able to control the military. The coup was not merely a seizure of office, it was the capture of the state's spine. The key moves were suspend the constitution, not abolish it, so he could claim temporary necessity, not revolutionary overthrow, dissolve legislatures, and remove civilian structure that could coordinate resistance, neutralize opposition through tribunals, disqualifications, surveillance, and selective prosecution, convert the judiciary from a check into a stamp. This is how military regimes survived beyond the initial shock. They stopped being a government and become the rules of the game. The judiciary, legalizing theft through necessity. One of the most important aspects of Zia's rule is not tanks on street. It is what happened in courtrooms. Zia's regime benefited from from the Supreme Court's validation of the coup under what became known as the doctrine of necessity. Once the doctrine is accepted, a state has quietly admitted a terrifying principle. If stability is threatened, legality can be suspended by whoever holds the gun. This is institutional poison because it teaches every future ambitious actor, military or civilian, that law is conditional. It is an independent standard, it's a flexible tool. The judiciary under Zia was not merely intimidated, it was restructured. Judges were appointed and promoted in ways that aligned the legal system with regime survival. This matters because dictators don't just fear crowd, they fear procedures. Any procedure that can remove them must be bent, captured, or replaced. Once court learns obedience, democracy becomes a ritual. Elections may return, but sovereignty doesn't. Bhutto's hanging, decapitation, not punishment. The execution of Zulfikar Ali Bhutto in 1979 was not simply revenge, it was a strategic decapitation. Zia understood something that many weak rulers ignore. The rivals, living rivals, are magnet. As long as Bhutto lived, he remained a symbol around which resistance could organize. Even in prison, even under propaganda, even under legal attacks, Bhutto remained a political son. So Zia removed him permanently. Once you hang an elected prime minister, you can communicate a new constitutional reality. Civilian leaders exist by permission, not by merely punishing a man. You are not merely punishing a man, you are rewriting the psychology of politics for an entire generation. That single act pushes Pakistan into deeper civil military asymmetry because it taught civilians the price of overreaching, humiliation, imprisonment, and death, while the uniform remains protected. Islamization, religion as legitimacy, replacement, and social context. Zia's Islamization is often discussed morally, good Muslim leader versus religious extremist. That misses the core. The central truth is Zia used Islam not primarily as faith but as statecraft. He needed a source of legitimacy stronger than elections. Religion can do that because it offers transcendent authority. God's law outranks man's law. Social policing. Ordinary people enforce norms on each other. Moral justification for repression. Anti Islam equals to anti state. Alliance building with clergy and conservative networks. Narrative armor against foreign pressure. You are attacking Islam, not me. That could be an example. Islamization under Zia included Sharia benches and the federal Sharia court, empowerment of ulema and conservative parties, hudud ordinances, criminal law modifications around zina, theft, etc. Expansion of blasphemy related ordinances, zakat and usher policies with sectarian consequences, cultural restrictions, and moral policing norms, education and media reshaping word Islamic framing. But again, the essence is not the list. The essence is Zia converted religion into state infrastructure. Once a religion becomes infrastructure, politics becomes dangerous. Why? Because policy disagreements can be reframed as sin, hearsay, insult, blasphemy, apostasy. That creates a political environment where violence becomes morally justified. A secular state can repress you and still admit its repression. A religious political state represses you and calls it righteousness. That is far harder to undo. The gender and legal catastrophe, the state versus the vulnerable. Among the most destructive consequences of Zia's legal transformation was how it impacted women and vulnerable groups. In many cases, the architecture created conditions where victims could be treated as criminals, especially under hudud related frameworks where evidently standards and social stigma could trap a person. The deeper mechanism is crucial. When a regime wants obedience, it often targets the groups that can't fight back. It creates fear through social shame, legal risk, and moral panic. This fear becomes self sustaining. Families police their daughters, neighbors police neighbors, community police the weak. This is perfect authoritarian loop. You don't need endless police if society becomes your police. Partyless elections and controls civilianism. Democracy as custom. Zia eventually held elections, but non party elections are not neutral. They are fragmented machines. Parties create collective identity and discipline. Removing parties creates localism, patronage, sectarian mobilization, and elite manipulation. This is not a democratic concession, it's a controlled re entry of civilians into a framework designed to keep them weak. Zia also expanded presidential powers, notably via the Eighth Amendment, to keep ultimate authority in the presidency, an office he controlled as military chief that allowed dismissal of governments, dissolution of parliament, coercive oversight of elected representatives, and permanent threat hanging over civilian leadership. So when even when civilians were in they were not sovereign, they were managers under a landlord. Afghanistan, the greatest strategic win and the most expensive blowback. If Islamization was Zia's internal legitimacy machine, Afghanistan was his external leverage machine. After the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan in 1979, Zia positioned Pakistan as the frontline state in an anti Soviet proxy war, which gave him massive US support, military aid, intelligence partnership, diplomatic protection, geopolitical relevance far beyond Pakistan's size. He famously ridiculed early US aid offers as peanuts, then extracted far more. Whether the exact phrasing is myth or not, the underlying behavior is consistent. He negotiated as a man who understood his value. This period strengthened the ISI and entrenched the concept of Pakistan as a state that could generate geopolitical rent by becoming the battlefield host of major powers' war. But the blowback was immense. Militant networks normalized, jihad narrative institutionalized, weapons and training ecosystems spread, narcotic pipelines grew, sectarian groups gained confidence and funding. The state learned to use non state actors as strategy. The Afghan war didn't create militants, it created the habit of militant utility and addiction to proxy leverage that later became uncontrollable. Zia's Afghanistan strategy is like taking steroids, immediate strength, long term organ failure. The nuclear program, cold success, permanent deterrence. Zia's regime also oversaw the militarization and acceleration of Pakistan's nuclear trajectory. From a pure strategic perspective, this is one of the strongest state survival achievements of his era. Nuclear weapons transformed Pakistan's security posture. They created deterrence, changed regional calculations, gave Pakistan a form of sovereignty that even major powers must respect. But nuclear capability also contributes to another dangerous reality. It can embolden risk taking under a shield of deterrence. A state that believes war will not escalate beyond certain thresholds can become tempted into dangerous adventures. Zia's nuclear legacy is thus a double-edged sword. It secured the nation, but also contributed to future strategic instability potential. The economy, growth on external rents, not institutional strength. Zia's period saw economic improvement in certain metrics, but much of it was driven by external flows. Remittance from Gulf, labor migration, foreign aid tied to Afghanistan, capital inflows, and temporary expansion of the middle class. When growth is rent driven rather than productivity driven, it creates false confidence. The state looks stable because money is coming, not because institutions are getting stronger. Zia's deeper economic legacy is not development, it is the strengthening of a military bureaucratic elite nexus. The state's high ground remained controlled by the same network, now protected by religion, security narratives, and potential pardon and foreign policy leverage. Death by plane crash, the unfinished ending of an unfinished state. Zia died in a plane crash in 1988, along with senior figures including Pakistan's top military leadership and the US ambassador. The circumstances remain controversial and fertile ground for conspiracies. But the most important point is not who did it. The most important point is what his death demonstrated. When a leader builds a system of secrecy, proxy, purchase, ideological control, and institutional capture, he creates too many enemies, too many competing factions, inside and outside. In such a society, death becomes plausible by many hands. Zia's end fits the pattern of many power architects. They survive dangers from below, but are eventually threatened by forces within this elite machinery they themselves empowered. Zia's real legacy, a state that cannot return to innocence. Zia's most enduring legacy is not law or policy, it's a structural shift. The military became the final sovereign. Civilian governments could exist, but only within boundaries defined by security establishment. Religion became a political weapon. Once religion enters law and governance as coercive infrastructure, it is extremely hard to remove without civilian conflict. ISI and proxy logic became permanent. The habit of using non state actors and the domestic security consequences of those decisions became part of the state's DNA. Institutions learned submission. Courts, media, bureaucracy learned how to cooperate to survive. That cultural memory remains. Political culture mutated. Politics became more sectarian, more patronage driven, more fragmented, less national, less civic. These shifts do not end when the ruler dies, they persist because they are incentives. Incentives reproduce behavior. The brutal verdict Zia won power, lost the future. Zia-ul-Haq created a case study in the most dangerous form of leadership, the man who wins in the short run by choosing tools that destroy long run stability. He stabilized his regime by breaking democratic institutions, hanging a civilian symbol, using religion to justify coercion, renting out Pakistan's strategic geography, normalizing proxies, and expanding religious intelligence power, making the military unchallengeable. He didn't just rule, he rearranged the state so that even after his death, the state system could keep functioning in his image. That is why he remains polarizing, because both sides are partly correct. Yes, he strengthened deterrence and played geopolitics effectively. He also planted seeds of intolerance, militancy, sectarian fracture, and democratic weakness. And here's the harsh truth: a leader can be strategically brilliant and historically catastrophic at the same time. Zia-ul-Haq is that contradiction embodied. What that means is a power lessons. Legitimacy is repressible, institutions are more important than speeches, the most effective control is self policing society, foreign policy can buy domestic immunity, short term victory can lead to long term suicide.